All right, so I got to the call. She had a loose toilet bowl, and this was yet another rotten lead bend or a rotten stub sticking up. Actually, it wasn't a bend. I was hoping it was a bend because I was going to change it, but because this went straight down, it was going to create more of a problem opening up a big hole, which was going to entail her having to replace the tile, and she didn't want to do that. I did recommend replacing the pipe. They just couldn't afford that big of a job, so I ended up soldering a deep floor flange onto the lead. Now, let me apologize in advance because this is the rattiest looking solder job you're ever going to see. It has integrity, but it looks terrible because my wiping cloth gave up the ghost in the middle of the job. It was frayed and it kept latching onto the solder, so I couldn't really wipe it smoothly. What I'll do is in the upper corner here in the cards, I'll link a video where I did a proper solder joint with a proper working wiping pad, and you can see what the joint is supposed to look like. So I apologize again. When you see this joint, you're gonna go, Bob, that's terrible. You're a butcher. Trust me, guys. Sometimes stuff happens in the field and you got to make do with what you have. Anyway, check it out. The bowl was loose. I got there, I yanked it, and you're going to see what I found. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. Please hit that notification bell. More importantly, hit the like button, because if you don't hit the like button, YouTube just takes these videos and puts them in their archives, and it doesn't show them to anybody. I'll be right back. So the complaint for this job was there was water seeping at the base of the bowl when she flushed it. She caulked it, recaulked it, and decided, you know what, I can't do this anymore, so let me call for service. That is a retrofit bowl that they had to build that platform at to meet the tank. It wasn't the original bowl of the house, and this is a Sloan flush mate, which is basically a pressurized tank inside of the toilet tank. And when you hit that handle, it's kind of like flushing a flushometer or a commercial toilet. Anyway, as you can see here, the base of the toilet, she was, again, caulking and recaulking it. And every time she flushed it, she would get a little water out of it. Didn't rock terribly, but there was some movement. So it was time to yank the bowl. And coming up here, you're going to see this toilet also had one of those auxiliary bidet seats on there, which I hate, but you know, people put them on and you got to deal with them. And I had to change that valve coming out of the back of the wall there because that valve did not hold. I had to shut the water main off. And as is always the case, flange bolts very rarely come off. So I had to get the old Lennox mini hacksaw out there and cut this one off. Now I could have used my multi-tool, but I just couldn't fit it. So I did it the old fashioned way, used a little muscle, knocked that thing off. And, you know, when I got the bowl off, or at least, yeah, when I lifted the bowl, excuse me, this is what I saw. It was kind of a train wreck. So I started scraping, started cleaning a little bit. I wanted to get that wax off there and see what was happening. And, you know, it was kind of what I expected. Back in the good old days, they should have soldered the floor flange on, but which is all too common, is guys would just leave the lead above the flange, and then with a hammer they would flare it over and basically peen it over onto the flange. And I guess in their minds that was going to hold the flange in place. And they didn't even screw the flange to the floor. So we had a double whammy here. And as you can see coming up in this next shot, I took my screwdriver, I started moving that lead. I wanted to see if in fact they did solder it, and they didn't. So I pried it up so I can get the flange off. That was a standard floor flange. It wasn't a deep flange. And as you can see here, it's kind of a wreck. And this was a straight stub. It was a 4x12 stub. It wasn't a bend. I expected to see a bend going toward the back, but it was a straight stub. So I got my 4-inch deep floor flange. I managed to get 2 screws in there. Now I just screwed this in place so I could trim the excess lead off, and you'll see that coming up. Again, I could use a multi-tool for this, but I used my hacksaw and I trimmed off the excess lead. And then after I do this, the next step is to try to clean it the best you can. And I found the best way, especially with these old lead bends, is I got this little Dremel-like tool and put a little sanding block on there. And the best I could is go around there and get that down to virgin lead. Do it on the inside, do it on the outside, do it on the top. I mean, this lead was somewhat compromised. And then I got my deep floor flange. Again, I'll clean it with the same Dremel type tool and prep it for tinning. And basically, I will use flux after I clean it, and then I will get 60/40 bar solder, and with my torch, I will tin the flange, which is basically putting a coating of solder onto the brass. And then I'll set it down in place. And as you can see, the lead here on the left-hand side, it was compromised. Now, I had a wiping cloth, which is what I used to wipe the lead that was compromised. It was frayed, it was cut, and it wasn't happening. So you're going to see a really ugly soldered joint here. But you know what? Uh, it had integrity. I got the solder down where it needed to get. You'll see I dripped it on those on that left hand side here where the lead was compromised. And listen, it was ugly, but it was solid. I also had to change this valve. Like I said, I had the water main shut off, so I changed the valve, and then I proceeded to go in with an extra thick wax gasket with a horn on it. Set that in place. Like I said, I got the two rear holes of this flange screwed into the tile, so it was pretty solid, and the floor was pretty level, believe it or not. So I had to do minimal using of anything really. I used one small shim, and I also decided to change the main supply going into the toilet, uh, because the old one was like so stiff and like really ready to break off. And the one for the bidet I left because that was a proprietary size. This is the base of the bowl. After I caulked it, I used Pheno Seal, which is a good quality water-based silicone seal. Flushed it. It worked fine. And I did present to her breaking the floor up and replacing the pipe. They just couldn't afford the job. It's plain and simple. So I worked my magic, and hopefully this will buy them a few more years of service. So there you go, guys. Another soldered floor flange in the books. Um, it's quite a common repair here in Brooklyn, New York. Now, my inclination was to change the piece, but that piece went straight down. That was about a 12-inch wiped straight piece of lead onto a 4-inch ferrule. They caulked the ferrule into a 4-inch extra heavy cast iron hub, and I was going to have to make quite a big hole to cut that hub or cut that ferrule out of the hub. And, I gave her some pricing, with the tile guy coming in to replace the tile, and they just couldn't afford it. As is the case with a lot of people here. So I said to her, let me work my magic, even though that uh, the top of the lead was somewhat compromised. I actually managed to get it on there. Again, that joint is just horrible looking, but it had integrity, and I managed to catch 2 screws in the flange. So I'm confident that it's going to work well. The floor was relatively level. I had to use one little wedge. And you know what? It's solid. I used that Pheno Seal caulking. They'll be good to go. Folks, again, thank you for stopping by. I think my next video is going to be on a garbage disposal installation uh, on an island sink. They sent me pictures. They got my name, I guess, through Google, and they wanted me to connect a garbage disposal. I asked them for some photos, and they sent me some photos, and I looked at this thing and I go, whoa, this is going to be interesting. Anyway, I think you'll find that video interesting. If you're not already subscribed, please do so. Hit that notification bell, but more importantly, hit the like button. And keep an eye out for a couple of videos that may pop up here. I may have chose it. YouTube may have chose it. I want to thank everybody for coming by. I know you have choices when checking out plumbing videos. I'm honored you hit up my channel. I want to say stay well. And as always, guys, happy plumbing.